Kickoff of the 2025 college football season is officially here. That means football time in Lexington, Kentucky, as the Wildcats get set to take the field. Helping us break it all down and preview this upcoming 2025 season for Big Blue Nation, Nick Roush of Kentucky Sports Radio, one of the best in the business when it comes to talking all things UK, not just on the gridiron. Nick, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time. Great to link up with you once again. Excited to talk some Wildcats football.
Happy to be here, Mr. Phillips. Always a pleasure. I think I heard you on my TV last night. I think I heard you. Forget what game it was, but yeah, pretty cool. Cool to see you on the Netflix and hear about you on the Netflix.
Yeah, it's been a cool week, man, for sure. You keep watching, you might hear some more familiar faces or familiar voices, see some familiar faces, I should say that. But on that note, before we talk about this 2025 team, Nick, because they're featured in the documentary. And I just want to look back at kind of how we got to this point. Look back, if you don't mind, at the 2024 season and how it sets up. We don't have to spend a ton of time. I understand. But, you know, it's interesting. This time last year, the conversation was about Mark Stoops and the trajectory of the program. And I think a lot of us agreed that it felt really important for the trajectory of the program under his leadership. Well, they go 4-8, 1-7 in conference play. When you look back at the 2024 season, not saying, again, you've done it a ton because there wasn't a lot a lot of positives to draw from it after that Ole Miss game, especially. I mean, how do you label it? Like, when you look back on it, like, how do you quantify essentially just what happened last year?
The point you make is correct, is you thought that they had sort of accumulated at least enough star power and put enough Band-Aids on where, okay, there was a little leak in the boat, but you could have a good enough season to make sure that thing is floating and gets to the destination you want to get to. Instead, they just ripped the hole open and you just sunk to the bottom. And I think in some instances it probably was a good thing because it really showed it. Hey, it told them what they were doing wrong. And they had made a bet on some players and some star power that if we do things this way, it can take us to the next level, right? You have a couple of 10-win seasons and you think, all right, we're good at playing physical. We're good at running the football. Let's get some badass wide receivers in here, and that'll help us break through the roof. It didn't work, right? Like Barry Brown, he's probably going to be pretty good wide receiver 3 at LSU. He couldn't be a wide receiver 1 at Kentucky. Dane Key, he's going to be really good at Nebraska. Couldn't be the Superman they needed him to be, and some of it had to do with their quarterback play. But essentially, they made some bad investments, and I think in Stoops' case too is NIL. It's not going to be Kentucky's strong suit, right? Like, you know, it hurt them a little bit from a financial component to like just that year and what they're competing against. But really, Stoops spent more time bitching and moaning about his NIL situation than he did coaching ball, right? Like, you got to keep the main thing, and they got away from that. And you saw it in that documentary. I mean, Kentucky was everybody's get-right team. You know, the first episode about South Carolina and LSU, it's South Carolina's the big underdog. Kentucky's expected to win. Oh, here's Kentucky just helping them get right. Same thing with Florida. You know, their quarterback situation last year. You figure, all right, Wagway's good, but he's still a true freshman. If you're worth your salt, you go out there and you beat this true freshman quarterback, and instead he throws, I think of his, he completed only like 9 passes in that game, and 5 of them were 30-plus yard completions. Like, he did play great, but everything started working out after that moment for Florida because Kentucky quit. They looked like a poorly coached team, and they quit. And so, that to kind of get it to this year, Chris, essentially what they've said in as many words is we got killed because we didn't have the right amount of depth. We invested in these stars, and a lot of them got hurt, right? Like they paid for an offensive tackle from Tennessee who didn't play half the year. Senior day, he's at the hot dog stand. They paid for a running back who was supposed to be their main ball carrier. He didn't play for them. Their quarterback that they paid for, he ends up retiring for football because he got dinged up so badly, right? Like they're heart of their defense. He goes out, misses the last 4 games. Middle linebacker, they can't stop the run anymore. And then they got a first-round cornerback who missed 5 SEC football games. Like, they had a lot of issues with injuries, and they said, all right, we're going to try to beat you in numbers this year. We're going to be the North in the Civil War. We're just going to overwhelm you with bodies. So they really like their depth from that standpoint, and they think that the key to this year, and it kind of works out this way because the schedule's a little bit lighter at the end, where if you have the right depth, you're too deep, particularly on defense across the board, and then you feel good about your running back situation. Then by October, late October and into November, when things you can kind of come up for air, you should be at your best. And that hasn't always been the case for Mark Stoop's team. So they've at least changed their approach, and you hope it works out because we can't be having another August where they're reminding us about how terrible the team was, because that's what any given Saturday's been.
Nick, you mentioned Mark Stoops going into his 13th season, and of course, all throughout the offseason, it's hot seat chatter, and Stoops' name isn't one that leads off the conversation, but at some point, I think it obviously comes up. Just anytime you've been somewhere that long and you're coming off a season like they had last year, I'm just curious to get your thoughts. What's the vibe around Mark Stoops going into his 13th season in Lexington? Is there any legitimacy to like hot seat chatter? Because I know the buyout obviously plays a major factor here as well.
This is the kind of year before the year, and I know it's definitely not the case for some Kentucky fans. Some are already over him; they're just done with him, and that's a byproduct of longevity, right? Things can get stale. You saw it with John Calipari, where things kind of just run its course, and people are ready for a change. It's a little bit different with Kentucky basketball and Kentucky football. This guy's your all-time winningest coach, so. Athletic director Mitch Barnhart, he's given Stoops a little bit more rope. He called it, he described last year as a one-year blip, even though I think most diehard fans would say, no, there was some cracks in the foundation beforehand. But in reality, that buyout's too large. It would be the second largest buyout in the history of college football, only behind Jimbo's. It'd even be more than the $22 million that Gus Malzahn got. That he got it in like a week. I think they at least would have 60 days to get this together for Stoops. But essentially the AD said, you know what? He knows where he went wrong. We're going to hit the reset button. They feel better financially where they are in the league because of revenue sharing. And then on top of all of that, he hasn't done the break glass in case of emergency and just fire everybody, a whole staff fire sale. This year was let's kind of get back to what we were doing. And if they can ease the waters, right? If they can get through this storm, we still don't know what the schedule is going to look like in the future. But one thing he's done that has never happened at Kentucky, they've actually recruited high school quarterbacks well. Mark Stoops hasn't started a high school quarterback. Now, this doesn't count injuries. I'm not talking there's an injury and there's a backup who comes in. The last quarterback to start for Mark Stoops, it was a high school recruit in play, was Drew Barker in 2016, and he lasted 2 games before he was gone for the year. Like, they just haven't done, for a decade, they just haven't got high school quarterback recruits. Cutter Boley is entering his second season. He flashed at Texas, and you can really see the step from him from year 1 to year 2. I expect him to get some run this year, whether Zach Calzada gets hurt or, you just kind of want to see what the kid has. He looks a lot better, so he's on the right trajectory. And then they signed a top 100 kid in Matt Ponatoski in this upcoming class that looks like the real deal. Cincinnati Moeller is one of the top schools in Ohio. Kid in his first year starting had 58 touchdowns, 4,000 yards passing, and only 3 picks. Like, he's a ball player. So there is a long-term path forward if they can really just like bear down and kind of grit and grind their way through what will be a challenging schedule this season.
Nick, that said, let's look at this 2025 football team. I want to first start on the offensive side. You do have some coaching staff continuity with Bush Hampton back as offensive coordinator. It's been a long time since Kentucky could say back-to-back years they have the same OC. A lot of new pieces, though, on offense. Zach Calzada taking over at quarterback. Many SEC fans obviously familiar with that name from his days at Texas A&M. You got one starter back on the offensive line. Yeager Burton also returns with experience. Also, you got picked up Shiaz Pete out of the portal. I know that's a guy they expect to be a contributor. Jamori Macklin, Kendrick Law, they're going to lead the way at the wide receiver position. Josh Caddis is back at tight end, one of the lone returners on the offensive side. And then Seth McGowan, Dante Dowell, they look to be the top backs going into kickoff. Nick, simply put, what are you expecting from this offense in year 2 of Bush Hamden. Again, a lot of new pieces, a lot of new faces, and
Yeah.
Kentucky goes back to the well in regards to a transfer portal quarterback yet again.
Yeah, and it's funny if you even Kentucky fans, if you ask them what guys are back on offense, it'd be hard to name some of them. I mean, there's only I think 4 regular contributors. They don't have a receiver back with more than 10 receptions. Jamori Macklin's a guy who he's explosive, but like it's kind of deep shot guy that you're probably only going to hit with 3 receptions a game, maybe. So there's a lot of questions in the wide receiver for me. That's at least where it stands for me. There's a kid in Harley Gilmore that they're really high on, and you look at him, you say, well, that's their best receiver. But he got in trouble during the offseason. He transferred to Nebraska, had a cup of coffee there for a couple of weeks in spring practice before he returned back. Like, well, are the screws loose in between his head? Can he get it done for you? I don't know. And then on the other hand, you got Kendrick Law, who they say the offense is going to run through him. Well, I know Bama's receivers are good, but he could never really crack into the rotation there. So that's I think the biggest glaring hole. But it won't matter as much if they can run the ball well. And that's kind of what they've built this on. They've done the portal thing before, Chris, where it's like we got to rely on the portal because we've just got too many misses in high school recruiting. But Jalen Farmer's a guy that's back. If Jagger Burton figures out the center position, he had some snapping issues when they tried it a couple of years ago. You cannot have snapping issues. But Josh Braun, he was a guy on that documentary playing for Arkansas last year. Alex Walschlager at right tackle, 2-year first-team All-MAC selection, like team captain guy. Shiash Pete, who you mentioned, that's an all-conference guy who was at New Mexico State. They took a different approach in the portal. In the past, it was exclusively, we're going to take these guys who they didn't pan out at the power conference level, but they played at this, so they know what it takes. They said, no. We're going to get guys who kicked ass at a lower level, and we're going to bring them in. They're all conference guys at the G5 level. This is their last shot. Let's see what they can do. And that's the case of Pete, Walschlager, and you mentioned McGowan. This is a guy who, I mean, he told me he was facing 70 years in prison. Him and 2 other guys at Oklahoma. I believe it was, I don't know how to phrase it, but basically they robbed a guy at gunpoint, a drug dealer or something along those lines. Like that, very bad, very dumb. That was 5 years ago, though, I want to say. It might have even been pre-COVID. He was out of football for a year or 2. Ended up at the NAI ranks, then the JUCO ranks. Then was at New Mexico State last year. And in his words, he's like, I just had to keep taking the next right step. And now it's, all right, here's my time to shine. It's one of those things, Chris, sometimes you talk to people in these programs and you ask them, and they want to kind of be hesitant. They want to play coy. They don't want to gas up guys too much. They made that mistake with Devin Leary. They gassed that guy up too much. But within 2 weeks of Seth McGowan being there, they're like, this guy's the real deal. He's going to be a star for him. And that's what they're expecting. Somebody compared the way his running style is to Isaiah Pacheco, where he just is like angry at the ground. He just runs so hard. So when Kentucky's been at their best, they've been able to run the damn ball. McGowan with Dowdell, who is he led the Big Ten in rushing touchdowns last year at Nebraska. He's just a hard, short yardage back. They've sucked in those situations before. They can make it work because I think Calzada, like, he's not going to wow anybody. He's not going to be high on these quarterback rankings. But he's got some Diego Pavia to him where it's like he's just going to make some winning plays. You need to get 4 yards on third down, he'll get you 6. You need to get 7, he'll get you 9. Whether he's running, whether he's ad-libbing and throwing around, like, he's going to find a way. So it's not going to be a great offense, but I think they can. There's a right recipe there to make it work.
Nick, to the other side of the football defense, it seems that Mark Stoops has always been the calling card for this Kentucky team, and especially physicality on the defensive side. You boosted the interior defensive line with a guy like David Gusta from Washington State. Khalil Sanders is back manning the interior. You get McKeese Humphrey Grace from FCS South Dakota to man the edge position. Gerard Smith II, others going to look to create a presence there. Alex Afari Jr. back at linebacker along with DeVaron Rayner boosted that room as well with Cam Olds from Kent State and Sam Green from USC. And a lot of experience in the secondary led by Joan Queese, J.K. Hardaway, Jordan Lovett, and Ty Bryant should be a strength. All in all, Nick, that being said, there's more familiarity on the defensive side, but again, you do lose some big pieces that went off to the NFL from this defense. Thoughts and expectations for the defensive side of the football this season?
The part for me, like the good and the bad, right? The good I mentioned earlier is just depth in the secondary and the defensive line. You lose Deion Walker. I mean, that guy. You saw him media days walking around last year. Like
One man wrecking crew.
I mean, yeah, he played with a broken back for half the year last year. So like he is, you, it's hard to replace that. But they're really high on David Gusta, who's just a one man havoc machine. The guy mentioned Braun earlier. He described it as, usually you got interior guys. They either got speed or physicality, and he can kind of beat you with both. So they've gotten a little bit of twitchier on the defensive line. I like that. And I like in the secondary, people will see the Ole Miss game as kind of a fluke. They should have beat Georgia too the week before, right? You had the pick six that was called back and a lot of stuff. They had some good things going in some of those games against high quality opponents because their secondary was very talented. That Ole Miss game, Trey Harris, I think, only had one catch, one explosive play, right? It was just keep everything bottled up. And they made things hard on the most explosive offense in the SEC. And a big part of it's just because of the secondary, right? They're bringing everybody back except for Hairston. They got a lot of guys who, if they didn't play a ton, like they were either starters or they were that rotational piece that got in the action a lot of time. They're really leaning on this secondary to be a strength of their team. So if you can create some turnovers, and if you can also just put those guys out in the island, let your defensive linemen tee off, like that helps a lot. But really, it all comes back to where it didn't matter at the end of the year because teams were running all over him. I think Jarquez Hunter just scored another touchdown. He had about 250 against the Cats that day. Florida ran all over him. Louisville ran all over him. And that you just hadn't seen that in a long time in the Mark Stoops era. So I think those inside linebacker, can those guys get it done? David Rayner's a little light in the shorts. It's hard for him to keep on weight, so you wonder about the durability. They've recruited well in there, but it's guys who haven't played. So to me, if they can solve that piece, right? If they can fit the run and just aren't an absolute sieve, then they can do some other stuff that can make them really disruptive, particularly in the passing game. But if you can't stop the run, it doesn't matter.
Nick, I know special teams is a facet of the game that gets overlooked, but obviously you and I both know when the margins are razor thin. In this conference, it can make a difference one way or the other between winning and losing. For the Cats this season, Jacob Callway taking over the kicking duties, Aiden Laros manning the punter position. You got some options in the return game, Kendrick Law, Jamori Macklin. What are you expecting from the specialists? Anything, quote-unquote, special from this group this year?
Well, the thing that's fun is the Cowway kid, he's from either Montana or what. He's from out west, and he would share videos of him kicking in the higher altitude and just banging 70-yarders. He's got a huge, huge leg. Now, how accurate is he? I don't know, but Stoops was saying last year that he was hitting 60-yarders during training camp. So that could be a lot of fun. And they didn't kick a lot of field goals last year. Three people to death. It doesn't. I don't care. 3 them to death. I do think the part that is important is Kentucky's SP plus rating. It's higher than most because they've been so good in specialties, particularly in the return game with Barryon Brown. That dude had an SEC record for returns. I mean, he's a stud. He knew how to do it. You don't have him, but Kendrick Law was the kickoff specialist for Alabama during his time there. So if you can get something out of that unit where, especially for an offense that doesn't look like it's going to be the most high powered, that's a step in the right direction. But it does sting because it was fun whenever you would see a team like, why are they kicking to Barryon Brown? Like, why are you even giving him the chance? Like bam, that could change the game.
Nick, that said, this upcoming season, 6 starters are back for what it's worth. Obviously, that stat doesn't mean as much now in the portal era. 3 on offense, 3 on defense. When you take a look at the schedule, you open up in non-conference play against Toledo, an interesting opener because you think about what Toledo did to Mississippi State last season at Starkville. You jump right into conference play really quickly, week 2 against an Ole Miss team that obviously is going to be coming in looking for some revenge. Road trips include 2 South Carolina, 2 Auburn, 2 Vandy, 2 Louisville, and then the home slate, obviously, and also 2 Georgia, I should throw in there as well. Also, you host Texas, Tennessee, Florida, and some big home games. I also mentioned Ole Miss.
Tough.
When you factor all that in, Nick, I'm curious. Again, we're in year 13 of Mark Stoops. I think I don't know if it's a weird question to ask, like what are realistic expectations? Because again, when you're that far in, I'm just curious. I know that the public perception, the conference-wide, national, whatever, is really down on Kentucky. I guess, Nick, my question for you is, what are your expectations for this season? But also, are things as bad as they seem from the outside perspective of the program?
I might have said yes a couple months ago, but I think this is kind of where they want to be. Mark Stoops is at his best when he doesn't have any believers. He loves the doubters. He loves the haters. Bring them on. And he's built a team that kind of reflects his identity, where it's a lot of these sort of castaways who have been doubted their whole careers. Now they get a chance to do it in the SEC. So I think for Kentucky fans to be satisfied, they need to see a well-coached team that is competitive, that is a thorn in the sides of a lot of these teams in the SEC, because that was kind of their MO through his ascension was, we're not going to beat you, but we're going to make sure you feel us the next day. We're going to be a physical football team. And so I think by doing that, they have a chance to be in some games and to potentially get back to postseason play. Because if you can punch Ole Miss in the mouth in week 2, that series, they always play it close, and that is an inexperienced group. They have the lowest amount of returning production in the entire conference. They're breaking in a true freshman not true freshman, but a first-time starting quarterback. We saw with Jackson Dart, it takes a little while to get the engines revving in Lane Kiffin's system, and you don't have just that talented group of wide receivers to be able to lean on. So, like a team like that, if you can bog them down with your physicality, Tennessee's another team. They're going to want to play in the mud too. Georgia. Those are all games that they can turn into a game of rock'em sock'em robots. And so I think, like, I haven't done my whole preseason prediction every single game, but it feels like a year where Kentucky can get to 5 wins and they're playing for a 6 against Louisville. Right? You win at Vandy, you win your other non-cons, and even though they doesn't always look pretty, you ain't got to be pretty to be gritty. So go out there, play some rock'em sock'em robots, and it'll be ugly at times, but it'll keep you in the fight and give you a fighting shot to win.
Nick Roush, Kentucky Sports Radio, one of the best in the business when it comes to talking UK. And again, not just football, basketball, baseball, everything in between. Nick, it's always a pleasure, my friend. I appreciate you taking the time. Let folks know, in case they've been living under a rock, where they can check out all your great work.
Yeah, I'm at Roush KSR on the X, the Twitter, whatever you want to call it. But we put out a lot of stuff too on the Kentucky Sports Radio YouTube channel and KentuckySportsRadio.com. So check us out there. We're having fun all season long.
Nick, I appreciate you taking the time, man. Let's definitely do it again soon.
Always a pleasure.